In the Era Indominus, as the galaxy burns under endless war, Captain Demetrian Titus faces a mandate that would break lesser warriors. Primarch Roboute Guilliman himself has commanded Titus to defend not just Macragge, but all of Ultramar, and to expand its borders back to their ancient glory of 500 worlds. 500 worlds, each one a potential battlefield, each one vulnerable to Tyranid hive fleets, chaos incursions, Necron tomb awakenings, and countless other horrors. Even for an Ultramarine of Titus's caliber, such a burden would be crushing without the right people at his side. As Master of the Watch and Warden of Ultramar, Titus has assembled a council that transcends traditional command boundaries. He's brought together Space Marines and Mortals, warriors and diplomats, psychers and fleet commanders, each chosen for their exceptional skill rather than a rigid adherence to doctrine. They are the Wardens of Ultramar, and together they embody what Titus learned through centuries of bitter experience: that mortals and Astartes both have much to offer in the defense of the Imperium. Of all the Wardens, none knows Titus better than Blade Guard veteran Sergeant Metaurus. Their bond stretches back centuries to a blood-soaked battlefield on the agri-world of Tarentus. Among the dead and dying, Metaurus discovers a child carrying Astartes' combat knife. A boy who walked through carnage was something that immediately caught the veteran's attention. The child had never known fear. In that moment, Metaurus made a decision that would echo through the centuries. He recruited young Demetrian Titus as an Ultramarines aspirant and became his mentor, guiding him through the brutal trials of the 10th Company and watching as the fearless child became a fearless Space Marine. Metaurus presided over much of Titus's training and became an indispensable presence throughout his stellar career. When accusations were leveled against Titus, when doubt shadowed his reputation, Metaurus met those accusations with open scorn. He knew his student. He knew the warrior he had forged. More than 2 centuries after that first meeting, during the Era Indominus, both men crossed the Rubicon Primaris. Metaurus was assigned to a small demi-squad alongside the newly returned Lieutenant Titus during the Residius campaign. Shortly after, they were sent on what their commanders clearly considered a suicide mission. The planet Zoshul had fallen to a Tzeentchian cult. A chaos relic, an idol to the Changer of Ways, sat fortified in a location that cannot be reached by conventional means. 4 Blade Guard veterans would have to fight their way on foot: Metaurus, Titus, and 2 others named Icaron and Levantus. They carried an Astropath in a stasis sarcophagus, knowing they'd need to call down orbital bombardment once the relic was destroyed. The Vox transmission would be simple: die well. When they reached the enormous hall containing the statue of Lord of Change, they deployed the Astropath and opened fire. That's when everything went wrong. A mutant chaos sorceress emerged from within the idol's orb and stopped time itself. With a telepathically hurled knife, she killed the Astropath, disrupting the mobile Geller field protecting the Ultramarines. Then she entered their minds, one by one, using their deepest fears to kill them. Icaron fell. Levantus fell. When she entered Metaurus' mind, she showed him his greatest terror, a vision of Titus transformed into a servant of chaos. But when she reached for Titus himself, seeking the fear she would weaponize, she found nothing. The boy who walked through that battlefield on Tarentus had become a man who truly knew no fear. Titus broke free, shattered the sorceress' force staff, and cut her in half with his combat knife. With her death, time resumed. The bolter rounds they'd fired struck their targets, destroying the statue in a beam of light that shot to the heavens. The Ultramarines' warship saw the signal and prepared orbital bombardment. They sent their final Vox: die well. Metaurus was grievously wounded, possibly dying. The mission was complete. The cultists were closing in. Any sensible warrior would have accepted their fate. But Titus refused. He secured his helmet, grabbed his mentor, and fought his way out of the blast zone, dragging Metaurus to safety before the ordnance turned everything to molten slag. Now in the Wardens of Ultramar, Metaurus brings centuries of battlefield wisdom to every decision. He still keeps an eye on his protege, watching to ensure the man who knows no fear doesn't let that fearlessness lead him into situations even his prodigious skills can't overcome. After all, Metaurus has seen Titus charge headfirst into the enemy too many times to count. Someone has to be ready to pull him back, or drag him out. If Metaurus embodies the past that shaped Titus, then ancient Galerum Gadriel embodies his future. Young by veteran standards, Gadriel's promotion to Ancient, bearer of the Second Company's sacred battle standard, came not through age or seniority, but through courage, leadership, and iron-forged loyalty earned in the Residius campaign. That loyalty wasn't easily won. After making a pilgrimage to Castor Tanagra on his homeworld of Talisar, Gadriel's unrelenting will caught Captain Sevastus Acheron's attention. He was invited to join the illustrious Second Company and swiftly rose to sergeant, commanding his own squad with efficiency and dedication to the Codex Astartes. Then Lieutenant Demetrian Titus returned from a century-long absence, and everything changed. Captain Acheron transferred Gadriel's squad to Titus's command during the Tyranid invasion of the Residius system. For Gadriel, this was already troubling, but Titus was no ordinary lieutenant. He'd served as a Death Watch Black Shield, warriors who renounced their chapter. He was connected to Project Aurora, a mysterious Mechanicus experiment involving warp technology. Most damning, he'd been taken by the Inquisition on suspicion of heresy more than a century ago. Everything about Titus looked suspicious, and when the lieutenant proved unwilling to discuss his past or share intelligence about Project Aurora, Gadriel's resentment grew. Here was a commander who gave orders but offered no explanations, who seemed touched by the warp in ways no true servant of the Emperor should be. Their partnership was professional but tense, built on duty rather than trust. Titus understood Gadriel's suspicions. They were entirely reasonable based on what the young sergeant knew. But he'd learned through bitter experience that some secrets must be kept, that some explanations only make things worse. The breaking point came on Hive-World Avarax during the battle against the Thousand Sons warband of Sorcerer Lord Imra. They fought through thrall bands and possessed cultists to reach the Astropathic Relay, where they needed to warn Chapter Master Marnius Calgar. Astropath Neoma agreed to send the message. But as she touched the warp, she suddenly turned on Titus, accusing him of being a traitor plotting to lure Calgar to the planet to kill him. For Gadriel, every suspicion, every doubt, every dark thought crystallized in that moment. He attacked Titus, ready to save his chapter master from what he believed was a chaos plot. But his squadmate, Brother Chiron, saw what Gadriel couldn't. The lie in the Astropath's eyes, the touch of corruption. Chiron shot Neoma. Her body exploded in warp energy, revealing the truth. She'd been possessed by Imra, the sorcerer using her to turn the Ultramarines against their own. Gadriel had been manipulated. He'd nearly killed an innocent man, his own commander, because suspicion had clouded his judgment. As Imra escaped and the truth of Titus's struggles became clear, Gadriel apologized. Titus, displaying the grace that would make him worthy of captaincy once again, accepted. He understood that based on what Gadriel knew, the suspicions had been wholly reasonable. Through the rest of the Residius campaign, fighting endless waves of Tyranids and Chaos forces, their bond tightened. Each battle forged another link. Each shared moment of survival strengthened their trust. By campaign's end, Gadriel left the Residius system with ironclad belief in Titus, tempered in the toughest battles of his life. That faith was tested again at Hive Mordecai. The Tyranids came in overwhelming numbers, their bioforms crashing against the Hive's defenses like a living tide. The Astra Militarum line began to buckle. If the gate fell, the Hive would be overrun. Millions would die. Gadriel stepped forward. Using his voice and the force of his conviction, he rallied the battered guardsmen. He gave rousing speeches that reminded them why they fought, what they defended, and that they didn't stand alone. With renewed resolve, the human soldiers held, the gate was saved, the Tyranids were repulsed. When Captain Titus heard of his feat, of a Space Marine sergeant inspiring ordinary humans to hold against impossible odds, he knew he'd found something rare. He personally recommended Gadriel to be promoted to carry the Second Company's battle standard after the loss of their previous ancient, an honor rarely given to one so young, typically held by grizzled veterans who'd fought for centuries. Some questioned the choice, but Titus knew what others didn't. Gadriel possessed not just courage and skill, but the capacity for growth that marks truly great warriors. He'd moved from suspicion to trust, from rigid doctrine to understanding when doctrine must serve the mission. Most importantly, he learned that the greatest strength lies not in never doubting, but in acknowledging when those doubts were wrong. Now, as one of the youngest ancients in Ultramarines history, Gadriel stands beside his captain in the thickest fighting, the blue and the gold banner of the Second Company held high. His plain-spoken advice matters as much as his martial might. When others see that banner in battle, they see not just a symbol, but loyalty earned through hardship and growth. Gadriel once tried to kill Titus. Now he'd die to defend him. Such is the bond forged when suspicion gives way to tested faith. In the grim darkness of the far future, information means survival. Communication across the void binds the Imperium together through the treacherous currents of the warp. This is the domain of astropaths, psychers who sacrifice their sight and risk their sanity to keep humanity connected. Even among that select group, Dainal Kornelius stands apart. For over a century, Kornelius has served in the Ultramarines' fortress monastery on Macragge, developing mastery over his order's skills that is second to none. He sends and receives interstellar messages with clarity other astropaths only dream of achieving. When the warp grows rough, when the Imperium churns with chaos nightmares, Kornelius never shies from danger. He plunges his mind into that maelstrom because Ultramar's defense demands it. This takes extraordinary bravery. The warp isn't a battlefield where courage and skill can triumph. It's a realm of pure madness where the slightest mistake can result in horrors beyond imagining. A spontaneous head explosion would be one of the kindest outcomes. The alternatives, possession, corruption, having your soul torn apart by demons, are far worse. To touch the warp every day, knowing each time might be your last, requires a specific kind of strength. It also does things to a person's personality. Dainal Kornelius has what reports might charitably call an abrasive personality. Constant proximity to horrible death has made him cantankerous, sharp-tongued, and difficult to be around. Few even among his own kind can stand his company for long, despite the undeniable value of his skills. He's seen too much, endured too much, survived too many encounters that should have killed him to have patience for foolishness or social niceties. Most commanders would consider Kornelius more trouble than he's worth. They'd request a different astropath, someone easier to work with, someone who doesn't make everyone uncomfortable. Demetrian Titus isn't most commanders. Over his long career, Titus has dealt with more than his fair share of uncooperative grumblers. He's learned that the best warriors are rarely the easiest to command, that genius often comes in difficult packaging, and that sometimes the most valuable team members are those who push back and question. More than that, Titus understands something about Dainal Kornelius. Beneath the abrasive exterior, beneath the sharp tongue and impatient manner, lies a warrior who has never once abandoned his post. A man who day after day, year after year, for over a century, has stood at the edge of the abyss and done his duty. When Ultramar needs the very best atropathic communication, there's no one better than Kornelius. So Titus forges past the prickly exterior. He endures the sharp comments. He accepts that working with Kornelius means dealing with a man who's been to the brink of madness so many times he has no patience left for anything less than absolute necessity. In return, he gets something invaluable, a communications network that functions even when the warp threatens to tear itself apart, a conduit to the rest of Ultramar that never fails when it matters most. In the Wardens, Kornelius is the voice that reaches across the stars. When 500 worlds need coordination, when fleets must be summoned, when Chapter Master Calgar or Primarch Guilliman himself must be contacted, Kornelius makes it possible. His mastery means Captain Titus can prosecute campaigns across multiple star systems simultaneously, receiving near real-time updates from distant battlefields and dispatching orders that arrive with crystalline clarity. The other Wardens have learned to work around his personality. They understand his grumbling isn't disrespect, but the voice of a man who stared into the warp too many times to waste words on pleasantries. When he speaks, they listen, because what he says is always relevant, always important, always earned through a price they can't fully comprehend. On those rare occasions when the warp is calm, when messages flow smoothly and the Imperium's nightmares are briefly held at bay, those who know Kornelius best can see the truth. He's exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-weary exhausted, but he never stops. He never asks to be relieved. He never suggests someone else take his place. Because Dainal Kornelius, for all his acerbic manner and difficult personality, is exactly the kind of warrior the Ultramarine needs in this darkest age. He proves that heroism comes in many forms, that courage isn't always loud or inspiring, and that sometimes the greatest strength lies in simply refusing to break, day after day, message after message, for over 100 years. In the grim darkness of the far future, victory often costs millions of lives. Planets burn, populations are exterminated, entire civilizations vanish in war's fires. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's another way. Sometimes worlds can be brought back into the Imperium's fold without a single drop of blood being spilled. Sometimes words can achieve what bolters cannot. This is Plenipotentiary Lucia Vestha's domain. A plenipotentiary isn't simply a diplomat or envoy. They're a representative who acts with the full authority and confidence of their master. When Lucia Vestha speaks, she speaks with Captain Titus's voice, with the weight of the Ultramarine Second Company behind her words, with the implicit threat of Roboute Guilliman's displeasure should her negotiations be rejected. The fact that a Space Marine chapter places their affairs in a human dignitary's hands says everything you need to know about Lucia Vestha's capabilities. Over her career, she has brought dozens of worlds back into the Imperium's embrace without violence. Rebellious planets that had declared independence, worlds that had fallen into corruption or heresy but hadn't yet passed the point of no return. Systems where misunderstanding or fear led to defiance. All of these she's reclaimed through negotiation, persuasion, and what's become known throughout the Second Company as her famously silver tongue. Her methods aren't gentle. This isn't soft diplomacy of compromise and mutual respect. Lucia Vestha operates from overwhelming strength, knowing that behind every word stands the might of the Adeptus Astartes, but the artistry lies in how she uses that threat. She knows exactly how much pressure to apply, precisely when to offer mercy and when to promise annihilation. And most importantly, how to make planetary governors and rebellious leaders understand that cooperation isn't merely the smart choice, it's the only choice. Her incredible negotiating skills have saved the Second Company from needless battle on countless occasions. Wars that would have cost lives, resources, and time have been avoided through her intervention. But her value to the Wardens extends far beyond formal diplomacy. In the many war councils Captain Titus now holds, Lucia Vestha plays a different but equally crucial role. She reads people. Years of negotiation have given her an almost supernatural ability to detect falsehood and hesitance. When officers make reports, when allies offer intelligence, when subordinates provide assessments, Vestha watches. She listens not just to what's said, but how it's said. She notes the pauses, the evasions, the subtle shifts in tone that indicate where someone's lying or holding back crucial information. This skill is priceless in an era where corruption lurks everywhere, where chaos cults can infiltrate even the most loyal institutions, where treachery wears 1,000 faces. The slightest falsehood, if left uncovered, could lead to catastrophe, forces walking into ambushes, resources diverted to wrong battlefields, trust placed in those who'd betray it. Vestha acts as a living lie detector, ensuring the information flowing to Titus is as accurate as humanly possible. Her diligent service and exemplary track record have earned great respect across the Second Company. The Space Marines, who in many chapters might view a mortal advisor with something between pity and contempt, treat Lucia Vestha as an equal member of the command structure. They understand her battlefield is no less dangerous than theirs. It's simply fought with different weapons. When negotiations reach an impasse, when rebellious worlds prove stubborn or corrupt officials refuse to see reason, Vestha has another tool, the looming threat of an Ultramarines fleet at her back. The psychological impact of watching battle barges enter a system's orbit, of knowing that if these talks fail, the next conversation will be conducted by drop pods and bolter fire, tends to focus the mind wonderfully. Vestha finds her job of cowing rebellious worlds considerably easier when her words are backed by the visible promise of orbital bombardment. Most importantly, Lucia Vestha embodies something the Ultramarines as a chapter are learning to embrace. The understanding that mortals aren't merely resources to be spent, but valuable contributors to the Imperium's defense. Her presence in the Wardens declares that humans and Space Marines can work together as partners rather than masters and servants. When Captain Titus faces the impossible task of defending and expanding Ultramar to 500 worlds, he doesn't have to fight for every single one. Some can be convinced, some can be reasoned with, some can be brought into compliance through words rather than war. For every world Lucia Vestha claims through negotiation, that's one less campaign the overstretched Second Company must fight. One less drain on precious resources. One less delay in the Primarch's vision for Ultramar's restoration. The silver tongue of Ultramar speaks, and worlds listen. Because behind that voice stands not just the threat of force, but the promise of partnership, the hope of joining something greater than themselves, and the very clear understanding that refusal means facing the Emperor's finest. Lucia Vestha offers worlds a choice, but she makes absolutely certain they understand there's only one right answer. 500 worlds. The logistics of such a realm stagger the imagination. Defending even a handful of planets requires massive fleets of Imperial ships, countless tons of materiel, millions of soldiers and support personnel. To coordinate defense of an entire stellar realm requires not just ships, but someone who can manage the impossible complexity of keeping those ships supplied, maintained, positioned, and ready to respond to threats that could emerge anywhere, anytime. That someone is Commodore Gaius Silva. From the bridge of his Emperor-class battleship, the Magnificence Enthroned, Silva commands the Ultramar defense fleet with tactical brilliance and administrative genius rarely found in a single individual. His isn't the glory of battle, though he's seen plenty of combat, but rather the unglamorous, critical work of making certain that when the Ultramarines need to move an army from one side of Ultramar to the other, the ships are there, the logistics are in place, and the operation proceeds smoothly. Space Marines alone can't defend 500 worlds. They need the Imperial Navy, they need transport vessels, supply ships, escort frigates, and the massive capital ships that provide orbital support. Massive flotillas carrying hundreds of thousands of souls must all be checked, accounted for, supplied, and coordinated. When the call comes to deploy to the next embattled world, Gaius Silva ensures they can actually get there. His reputation for utterly unflappable calm during even the most hair-raising emergencies has become legendary throughout the fleet. When warp storms threaten to tear a convoy apart, when Chaos Raiders emerge from the Immaterium to strike vulnerable transports, when mechanical failures threaten to leave ships stranded in the void, Silva responds with the same measured composure. His bridge crew has learned to take their cues from him. If the Commodore isn't panicking, then the situation, however dire it might look, can be managed. The calm isn't ignorance or foolish bravery. Silva fully understands the countless ways a space operation could go catastrophically wrong. He simply knows that panic helps no one, that clear thinking and decisive action are what survives crises, and that a commander who maintains composure in the storm gives their subordinates something to anchor to when everything else seems to be falling apart. But perhaps Silva's most valuable skill, the one that makes him truly indispensable to Captain Titus, is his ability to navigate the often tense relations between Space Marines and their human crews. This challenge can't be overstated. Space Marines are genetically engineered post-human warriors who can survive in the void of space, who've lived for centuries, who view time differently than baseline humans. They make demands for more speed, more firepower, and more discipline, without always understanding or caring that their mortal crew members are already pushing their limits. Human crews work in shifts because they need sleep. They require food, water, rest, and rotation cycles that Space Marines simply don't. They can die from exposure to conditions that would merely inconvenience an Astartes. They have families, fears, and limitations that genetically enhanced warriors sometimes forget exist. When a Space Marine captain orders a ship to push its engines beyond safe parameters, or demands maneuvers that risk thousands of crew members' lives, tensions can arise. Gaius Silva understands both sides of the divide. He speaks the Ultramarines' language, tactical necessity, strategic imperatives, the urgency of war in the 41st millennium, but he also speaks for the mortal crews under his command, explaining their limits, advocating for their needs, finding ways to meet the Space Marines' demands without killing his people through sheer exhaustion or recklessness. This balancing act makes him essential to the Wardens. Captain Titus knows that when he orders a fleet deployment, Silva will make it happen, but he also knows that if Silva says something can't be done safely or suggests an alternative approach, that advice is worth listening to. Silva doesn't say no to protect his own reputation or avoid risk. He says no when the risk truly outweighs the potential gain, when there are better options available, when the cost in human lives would be unconscionable even by the grim standards of the 41st millennium. In the vast strategic puzzle of defending Ultramar, Silva is the piece that makes all the others work. The Space Marines fight. The Guard holds the line. The Astropaths coordinate communication, but the fleet, Silva's fleet, ties it all together. Without ships, armies can't be deployed. Without supplies, worlds can't be defended. Without the constant, unglamorous work of logistics and coordination, the entire defensive strategy collapses. From the bridge of the Magnificence Enthroned, Gaius Silva watches over this maritime ballet with the calm assurance of a master at work. When crisis comes, and in defending 500 worlds, crisis is always coming, the bridge crew knows they can look to their commander and see steady hands on the helm. The Emperor-class battleship is appropriately named. There's a magnificence to what Silva does, even if it lacks frontline combat's glory. The magnificence of complex systems working in harmony, of millions of moving parts coordinated into a single cohesive whole, of a human mind managing challenges that would overwhelm lesser individuals. Captain Titus sleeps better on those rare occasions when he sleeps at all, knowing that Commodore Gaius Silva has the fleet well in hand, because in the impossible task of defending 500 worlds, success depends not just on winning battles, but on being able to fight those battles in the first place. And that requires ships, supplies, and a commander who never loses their calm, even when the galaxy is burning around them. The Ultramarines don't fight alone. When they deploy to defend their realm's worlds, they're joined by vast armies of the Ultramar Defense Auxilia, mortal soldiers who stand a cut above the regular Astra Militarum regiments in training, equipment, and discipline. These aren't conscripts pulled from hive gangs or agrarian quotas. They're professional soldiers, born and raised in Ultramar, trained to the highest standards, and led by officers who understand that fighting alongside the Emperor's Angels of Death means mediocrity equals death. Among these elite formations, the 30th Macragge Defense Auxilia stands particularly renowned. At its head stands Legatus Amelia Minervas, a woman who embodies everything the Auxilia aspires to be. As a dedicated scion of Macragge, Minervas can quote the Codex Astartes front to back. This isn't hyperbole or exaggeration. She's memorized Roboute Guilliman's masterwork with perfect clarity, understanding not just the tactical doctrines but the underlying principles, the strategic philosophy, the reasoning behind every formation and maneuver. Her devotion to the Codex matches that of the most pious Ultramarines, a level of dedication that is extraordinary in a mortal officer. But the thing that makes Minervas truly exceptional, where others see the Codex as immovable rules to follow without question, she understands it as a living document. Building upon generations of Auxilia commanders' work, she's adapted the Codex's guidelines and principles for use by her human soldiers, creating tactics and doctrines that honor Guilliman's vision while acknowledging the limitations and strengths of mortal warriors. Space Marines can survive wounds that would kill a human instantly. They can fight for days without rest. They can carry weapons that would crush normal soldiers under their weight. The Codex Astartes was written for warriors with these capabilities. To apply it directly to human troops would be disaster, sending mortals to execute tactics designed for post-human demigods. But the principles underlying those tactics, the emphasis on combined arms, the importance of strategic flexibility, the value of proper reconnaissance, the coordination between different unit types, these can be adapted. That's exactly what Minervas has done. She's taken the Codex Astartes and translated it into a language human soldiers can execute, creating doctrine that allows the Auxilia to operate alongside the Ultramarines rather than simply serve as expendable cannon fodder. The results speak for themselves. The 30th Macragge Defense Auxilia is particularly renowned and respected, attached to Captain Titus's fleet not because they're simply convenient, but because they're among the finest mortal soldiers Ultramar has to offer. When they take the field, they do so with discipline rivaling the Astra Militarum's best regiments and tactical sophistication that often surprises their enemies. As the Warden's liaison to their human soldiery, Minervas handles multiple crucial roles. She commands the 30th with fearless leadership from the front, leading by example in a way that inspires her soldiers to match her courage. But she also bridges the gap between the Space Marine strategic vision and its tactical execution by mortal forces. When Captain Titus develops a battle plan, Minervas translates that plan into orders the Auxilia can follow. When the Space Marines make tactical demands, Minervas explains what human soldiers can and can't do, ensuring expectations are realistic while still pushing her troops to excel beyond normal human limits. When victories are won, she ensures the Space Marines understand the sacrifices made by the mortals who fought alongside them. When defeats occur, she analyzes what went wrong and adapts her tactics accordingly, constantly refining her interpretation of the Codex based on real battlefield experience. This role is more critical than it might first appear. The Ultramarines are expanding Ultramar to encompass 500 worlds. They're fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously against Tyranids, Chaos Forces, Necrons, and countless other threats. Even with all their gene-enhanced might, even with their immortal endurance and superior weapons, there aren't enough Space Marines to be everywhere at once. Here the Auxilia becomes essential. While the Ultramarines serve as the spearhead, striking at the most critical targets and turning the tide of the most desperate battles, the Auxilia hold the line, garrison the reclaimed worlds, and ensure that territory taken remains secure. They're the occupation force, the defensive garrison, the soldiers who transform military victories into lasting peace. Under Minerva's command, the 30th Macragge Defense Auxilia exemplifies this role. They don't try to be Space Marines. They understand the vast gulf between mortal and Astartes capabilities, but they do strive to be the best mortal soldiers they can be, to honor the Codex Astartes in ways appropriate to their nature, and to prove that humans can stand alongside the Emperor's angels rather than merely beneath them. Legatus Amelia Minervas is built upon generations of tradition, refining and perfecting the art of mortal warfare in service to Ultramar. She leads fearlessly from the front because she knows officers who hide in the rear can't ask their soldiers to face death. She memorizes and adapts the Codex because she understands that doctrine without flexibility is dogma, and dogma gets soldiers killed. She serves in the Wardens because Captain Titus recognizes that defending 500 worlds requires more than superhuman warriors. It requires exceptional mortals who can command armies, win battles, and hold territory against the endless darkness. The 30th Macragge Defense Auxilia follows her into battle with confidence, knowing their commander understands both the ideals they aspire to and the limitations they must work with. The Space Marines respect her as a peer rather than a subordinate, recognizing that her expertise in commanding mortal forces is something even their centuries of experience can't replicate. When future historians of Ultramar write about how 500 worlds were reclaimed and defended in the Era Indominus, they'll note that it wasn't Space Marines alone who achieved the impossible feat. It was a partnership between the Astartes and exceptional mortals like Amelia Minervas, who proved that human courage, properly led and tactically sound, can achieve victories that echo through the ages. Individually, each member of the Wardens of Ultramar brings exceptional skill to Captain Titus's command, but their true strength lies in how they complement each other, creating a command structure greater than the sum of its parts. Matarus provides centuries of battlefield wisdom and keeps Titus grounded, preventing his fearlessness from becoming recklessness. Gadriel offers plain-spoken advice forged in personal growth's crucible, bringing youth's fresh perspective balanced by hard-won loyalty. Cornelius maintains communication across 500 worlds, his abrasive manner hiding a warrior's dedication that endured for over a century. Vesta reclaims worlds through diplomacy, saving lives and resources while detecting falsehood in war councils. Silva coordinates the massive logistical ballet of fleet operations, keeping armies supplied and ships positioned. Minervas bridges the gap between Space Marine doctrine and mortal capability, commanding the Auxilia with Codex devotion rivaling the most dedicated Ultramarines. Together they embody something unprecedented in the Ultramarines' 10,000-year history, a formal acknowledgement that mortals and Astartes bring different but equal valuable capabilities to the Imperium's defense. This isn't a new idea. The Ultramarines have long maintained close ties with Ultramar's human populations, but codifying it into the chapter's command structure, making mortals equal members of an Astartes captain's inner council, marks a significant evolution in how the chapter operates. This model would only work under a commander like Demetrian Titus. His century-long absence from the chapter, his service in the Death Watch, his experiences that taught him mortals and Space Marines both have much to offer. All of this shaped his understanding of command. Where other Ultramarine captains might view human advisors as useful but ultimately inferior, Titus sees the Wardens as partners, each bringing essential expertise to the impossible task before them. 500 worlds, endless enemies, limited resources. The Imperium is under siege throughout the galaxy, with Primarch Guilliman leading the Indominus Crusade while Ultramar's defense falls to its own people. The Tyranids hunger, Chaos corrupts, Necrons awaken, and now the terrifying specter of Necrosar Amintar, thought by many to be the genesis of the Destroyer curse, moves towards Ultramar with robotic hordes, a Necron so ancient and terrible that even other Necrons fear its passage. Against such threats, conventional command would fail. Standard doctrine would prove insufficient. The Codex Astartes alone, however brilliant, can't account for every situation, every crisis, every challenge that defending 500 worlds will present. The Wardens of Ultramar aren't simply a command squad. They're a new way of thinking about defense at a strategic scale. When mortal diplomacy can prevent war, Vesta acts. When fleet logistics determine success or failure, Silva provides. When human armies must hold territories, Minervas commands. When communication across the realm is critical, Cornelius endures the warp. When battlefield experience is needed, Matarus advises. And when the plain truth must be spoken, Gadriel doesn't hesitate. Captain Titus stands at the center of his council, bearing the title Master of the Watch, tasked with defending Macragge and Ultramar's soft interior while simultaneously expanding the realm to its ancient borders. The Primarch has asked the impossible, but Titus has assembled the people who make the impossible merely extraordinarily difficult. They are the Wardens of Ultramar. They are the hope that 500 worlds can be defended, can be reclaimed, can be held against the darkness, not through superhuman warriors' actions alone, but through the combined efforts of exceptional individuals, mortal and Astartes alike, who understand that in humanity's defense, every talent matters, every perspective has value, and the walls between human and space marine must be bridges rather than barriers. 500 worlds watch, 500 worlds wait. Standing at their defense isn't just Captain Demetrian Titus, but the council of exceptional warriors he's gathered around himself, the Wardens of Ultramar, guardians of the realm that Roboute Guilliman built 10,000 years ago and now tasks his sons to rebuild. Let the Tyranids come. Let chaos spawn its corruption. Let Necrons rise from their tomb worlds. The Wardens stand ready, each bringing their unique strength to defend humanity's greatest realm, for Ultramar, for the Emperor, and for the impossible dream that 500 worlds might stand united against the darkness.